North Carolina's Outer Banks are rich in both natural and cultural resources. The dynamic currents, shifting sandbars, dangerous storms, and wartime engagements have claimed thousands of ships off the coast. Maritime archaeologists at the UNC Coastal Studies Institute and East Carolina University's program in Maritime Studies are actively involved in maritime heritage research in the region. ECU graduate student Janie Knutson is particularly interested in the maritime losses during World War I off the coast of North Carolina.
My research is on what happened during the First World War off of North Carolina, looking at U-boats as a form of technology, as they had to travel almost over 2,000 miles to make it to the United States from Kiel, Germany.
In April of 1917, America entered the First World War after being provoked by the German regime's use of excessive force with their unrestricted U-boat campaign, which called for the sinking of any ship that crossed in their deadly submarine's path. The United States prepared for U-boats crossing into their waters with patrols along the coastline and an anti-submarine council to find new ways of thwarting their enemy. Little did they know that the German Navy prepared their submarines to make the 3,000-mile journey to North America. A handful of captains were given orders to commit as much mayhem and chaos to the local populace as possible and take any prize worthy of their time back to Kiel, Germany. Before America joined the war, the Germans had proved that their submarine could handle long-distance travel by sending a boat named Deutschland to Baltimore as a sign of trade and goodwill. U-151, piloted by Captain Henrik von Nostis und Jachendorf, arrived in American waters in the end of May of 1918, ready to sink as many ships as possible.
There was a total of 7 U-boats that came across the United States waters during the First World War. Only 3 of them came into North Carolina waters. The reason North Carolina was an important strategic place in the overall picture of the war was because of its proximity to shipping lanes. Different varieties of ships passed through our waters, and that led to an easy target system. So U-boats would see that and then want to target those merchant ships that were oftentimes unsuspecting of what was to come.
The U-151 steadily made its way into North Carolina waters after successfully sinking ships out of Virginia. On June 5, 1918, U-151 spotted and sank 2 steamships, the British Harpathian and the Norwegian Vinland. U-151's biggest success came 3 days later when they crossed paths with a Norwegian steamship, Vindegen. The ship carried 2,000 tons of copper and other priceless items. Too valuable to sink, the captain decided to hold the ship hostage until the goods on board could be transferred over without American patrols or heavy seas interfering. The 2 ships traveled together and encountered the American ship Pinar del Rio on June 9, 1918. The Germans quickly sank the ship and carried on with their prize while the crew of Pinar del Rio were left to row to shore.
The First World War was more solo attacks. Captains of the First World War were more personable, in my belief. They oftentimes were more cautious of what they were doing, so they cared about human life and wanted others to survive their attack. They would contact the ship before they were about to sink it and usually do an exchange of papers to make sure that it was a legal vessel, and then have the crew exit the boat before sinking it. In World War II, we had the wolf pack tactics, where we had U-boats ranging in different groups that would go and hunt and stalk boats and would sink them without giving warning.
It would be another month before another submarine would attack the North Carolina coast. In August of 1918, U-140, piloted by Waldemar Kaufemel, one of the most famous submarine operators during the war, moved south and stalked vessels off Diamond Shoal. On August 5, 1918, the U-boat stopped a three-masted schooner named Stanley M. Seaman, and upon finding out the crew did not have enough supplies to make it to shore, Kaufemel scolded them and towed them closer inland. His kindness ran out the next day when, encountering the American merchant ship Merrick, passed by another vessel, the Diamond Shoals light ship, or light ship number 71. The U-boat chased Merrick until the captain accidentally beached the ship on the nearby shoals. U-140 fired upon the ship while the helpless and undefended light ship radioed for help and reported what they were witnessing. In retaliation, the submarine turned on the vessel and shelled it out of spite. They had heard the wireless report being made, and even though the ship benefited the submarine by helping navigate through dangerous waters, they sank it anyway. U-140 sailed north, causing a stir along the coastline, and continued to attack various ships.
U-boats have a wide variety of weapons. We always think of the torpedo, and many can carry a large amount of torpedoes, but they also have to keep record of how many torpedoes they launch and how many they can store. So usually they come stocked with a giant guns on deck that if they are surfaced, they can fire shells of different sizes onto their enemy. They also keep track of having explosives, mini grenades, bombs to plant on ships. Most of the time, they actually would go and board the enemy vessel after they had taken the ship and place explosives on top of it and then sink it that way. Another way that they could sink another vessel was if it was a mine-laying vessel. U-117, for example, was a mine-laying vessel and could carry quite a lot of mines and laid at least 5 off of Wimble Shoals.
The final submarine to pass through the area was U-117, a mine-laying submarine captained by Otto Droscher. The U-boat had already laid several minefields along the Upper East Coast and preyed on small fishing vessels before passing into North Carolina. The submarine deposited its last mines off Wimble Shoals and laid in wait for any unsuspecting ships to pass through. On August 16, 1918, the British tanker Merlot struck one of the mines and quickly burst into flame. The captain tried to navigate the ship towards the shore as a fire raged below deck, but luck was not on his side as he accidentally steered the ship into another mine. The crew of the Chickamauga Coast Guard Station witnessed the chaos unfold from shore and quickly sprang into action as the oil leaked from the ship and turned the ocean into a blazing fire. While trying to get to safety, one of the lifeboats overturned with 6 of the British sailors plunged overboard. They clung to the sides of the overturned raft as the Coast Guard crew carefully navigated to them. If it had not been for the bravery of John A. Midget, Zion S. Midget, Prochorus L. O'Neill, Leroy S. Midget, Arthur V. Midget, and Clarence E. Midget, the British sailors might not have survived. For their bravery, these men were awarded medals from the United States Navy and the King of England after the war.
The role they primarily played in World War I was creating an atmosphere of terror. So the US government tried to actually shut down any talks of U-boats off of our coastline to keep the calm populace. However, instances like Diamond Shoals Lightship and Menace were too close for comfort to ignore. So a lot of coastal people started to panic and even asked the government for protection and even gas masks in the event that they were bringing over chemical weapons.
The last ship sunk off North Carolina was a Norwegian bark named Nordhav. On August 17, 1918, the submarine stopped the sailing ship and gave the crew 20 minutes to abandon ship before sinking it. Unlike the other submarines, U-117 refused to help the crew or tow them toward shore. Captain Droscher departed to help U-140 return home after suffering damage from a depth charge. Ironically, after the war ended on November 11, 1918, U-140 and U-117 were given to the United States as war reparations. The Navy conducted experiments on the submarines before finally using them as targets during aerial gunning practice off Virginia in 1920.
It's important for all of us to remember the history of these U-boats during the First World War because it's our history. It happened right outside our doors. It's still a history that connects us to an overall picture of where we came from and what we experienced all together.
No German U-boat would return to North Carolina until the Second World War. These 3 U-boats left behind a trail of desolation, fear, and destruction, preying upon the weak and undefended merchant ships. Though some offered kindness to their enemies, others sank ships mercilessly and with brutal efficiency. U-151, U-140, and U-117 were the first U-boat menaces in the region, and though they are oftentimes forgotten, the submarines left their mark on our local history.